where the potential for the ground reality of the growth of that country is shaky. They prefer not to similarly commit to long leases. Going forward, I think there's a huge demand for co-working spaces, and it is going to sustain, and it's going to replace a lot of fixed users of large office formats. After a few years, you plan to do a REIT, it will be quite similar in terms of format. Buying a REIT is similar to buying a property. Honestly, I keep telling my friends, don't even bother to read any statistics for the next 20 years.
Hi, welcome to the Property Show. I'm Jayashree Kurup. I'm editor MBTV, and I have with me Mr. Raj Menda from the RMZ Corp. Mr. Menda, thank you for joining us. We're talking about co-working spaces, the concept of shared spaces. Is this a generational thing, or do you think this is something to do with the state of the economy?
A lot of multinationals who I've always seen in cities or in countries where the potential for the ground reality of the growth of that country is shaky, they prefer not to similarly commit to long leases for their offices. Hence, they prefer to take spaces like a co-working spaces to test the waters in those cities. Apart from that, we've seen a lot of migration happening from large corporates who do not want to handle the running of the overheads of their own support staff, which is not running the profit centers, and is more acting like a cost center, and move to a fixed price co-working platform. Thereby, some of the companies which are moved with us, which are even large foreign companies, which are now moving into large co-working spaces with us with even longer tenures of lease, find that they're saving close to 30% of the running cost of the operations which they have. So these are the two formats. The actual users actually are the big multinationals, but and they're also young budding startups, because a lot of entrepreneurs have sprung up in the recent times, where a lot of millennials who are trying their hand at doing some startups because they're seeing huge valuations coming in for large companies. Again, prefer to work out of co-working spaces. Going forward, I think there's a huge demand for co-working spaces, and it is going to sustain, and it's going to replace a lot of fixed users of large office formats, because it's much more fun to be even in a co-working environment.
So, what are the new drivers of commercial real estate?
We find a lot of companies which are moving from chip design, chip manufacturing. Security has become a big issue world over in terms of data security and so on. And so to mitigate data security, a lot companies have moved in a huge back office operation to control the security networks across the globe. We've got a lot of research companies which have started moving into India. We have avionics companies which have moved in a large way. And these are a lot of new trends that are happening. And to my mind, that's currently occupying 60% of our new office offtake is happening by these kind of companies. And the traditional ones which continue, which has happened for the last decade, which is IT, ITS, is still continuing to grow in office spaces.
So do they need different formats of commercial space?
When they come to India for the first time, where their operation size is approximately less than about 500 people, they prefer a co-working format space. But once they start stabilizing to a large format of a few thousands of people which they need, they tend to migrate to necessarily move into their offices. Also, the advantage of the co-working formats that we provide them 100% of data security for working within the co-working environment of co-works which we own, so that there's absolute comfort in, and their own servers are also housed with us. So it becomes easier for them to operate in a full-fledged secure environment within our co-works, which is our brand.
And once they are established, they take larger spaces with you?
I mean, sure, they do take larger spaces with us, and some of them keep a mixed blend between the large spaces and the co-working, because a lot of training is also done out of co-working spaces before they migrate into their regular office environment.
And when they move to other cities, expand to other cities, again co-working happens?
When you take membership with in a co-works kind of a co-working environment, it automatically gives you the opportunity to start working across the various cities where the co-works has offices straight away. So that is a given. Now the question is, in case you need to move a larger operation, it's very easy to migrate from one city to the next or expand into the other city most comfortably within a few hours.
So how many cities are you present?
Currently we operate in 6 cities. And we'll be expanding within the 6 cities, and then we are going to a few tier 2 cities which have got a promise.
Green and sustainability is something that is the buzzword today. In commercial spaces, that makes a lot of sense.
Most of the multinationals are insisting on having a green building requirements as part of their mandate. So that is easy to provide because most of our buildings, I would say all our buildings are certified for different levels of green rating. And when it comes to the smaller companies, they are just working on price sensitivity, which are also exist in this marketplace.
And that's because they're mandated to do so, or it makes economic sense?
Both. I think it makes economic sense and mandated to do so because a lot of savings also that come about when they provide green buildings, especially when they are occupiers of a large format.
You have a lot of REITable quality space. What are your views on REITs?
After a few years, we plan to do a REIT. It will be quite similar in terms of format, where there will be a huge dividend payout. And in a slow market, which is what is happening today, where the most of the investors at least look at a dividend as an income, the REIT provides a good promise because it does churn out dividends every year.
So how should a retail investor look at REITs? Any advice to him?
Buying a REIT is similar to buying a property. And the biggest advantage is you can move in and out of it, provided you have an investment of at least 2 lakhs to make. But it's easy to move in and out of a REIT unit going forward. If you want to invest in commercial real estate, there's no better way of doing it. SEBI has done a fair amount of work over the last few years, I would say a decade, to see that REIT has become a good place for investors to buy into. And I do look forward that the REIT going forward will also happen in the residential, will happen in hospitality, it will happen in retail, it will happen in warehousing, and in all the avenues which do generate an income stream which can be given out as a form of dividend.
So to become REITable, all these have to be premium asset classes, right?
No, I think income bearing is the criteria. The question is, when an investor looks at it, he'll have to carefully examine the portfolio which the developer is offering onto the REIT, because he has to make a judgment call as to what of the portfolio has a better upside in the basket of the assets that are being put in. And based on that, you can see how your future is going to keep giving a better return.
Today, SEBI says that you have to have premium grade A space, at least 70% complete and...
The criteria for complete and under construction is no doubt laid out. But the word premium is not defined in terms of the way we are understanding it as grade A or anything like that. The premium basically means income bearing.
We talked about co-working. What about co-living?
As an organization, we only are in the co-working spaces. We opted not to use a co-living format, because I think historically what has happened is, when I look at it slightly differently, as to how the courts address the two types of occupiers, a commercial office or a commercial occupier versus a residential person staying in a home. They both actually, even though the same rules apply, they're treated at different footings. That's because for a commercial, it's treated more on a commercial transaction basis, and hence the contract has to be adhered to, and it's easier to operate that contract. But when a residential occupier does not pay you the rent or has overstayed their stated position, it is very difficult to move them out, because there's a lot of emotion and sympathy going, especially unfortunately if there are some older people or there's some people who have whatever medical conditions cannot move out. Then the courts and the police take a very different non-commercial view to that situation, and that becomes very sticky.
What do you think about the affordable housing movement?
I think if you can create affordable housing below 60 lakhs in the urban cities and below 40 lakhs or 35 lakhs in the tier 2 cities, honestly, I keep telling my friends, don't even bother to read any statistics. For the next 20 years, you can keep producing homes and people will keep taking it. And it's right now because the opportunity has increased even more, because the government has thrown a lot of incentives to affordable housing, and the demand, no doubt, it has always remained there. And keeping in mind that the premium homes are struggling to sell, and everybody is only still looking at affordable housing, but that demand is not going anywhere in a hurry. So it's just, there's enough to do for a long period of time.
Do you see a category of developers switching to affordable and staying there for a while?
I would say all residential developers, if they are not already into creating affordable housing or are not, will have to necessarily look at it, because I would say 60% of their turnover and profits will easily come from that segment.
Is there enough formal funding available?
There are a lot of funds specifically dedicated to fund affordable housing. It's a question of now his credibility of the developer and his track record, and he having not failed, he building out the quality, building it in time, which is the new expectations under ERA also. I think if they provide all this within these rules, I think it's a field day for anybody who's getting into that space.
Thank you so much.
Please subscribe to Magic Bricks on YouTube and click the bell icon to get new videos.